Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Marcus Sims here with you. Marcus Sims Media that we're presenting, and what we've been doing this past summer, what we continue to do is I'm calling this the 256 Power of Positivity Summer Series. So what we're doing is we're talking about things that'll uplift you, make you think, bring you some enrichment from an artistic standpoint, a mental standpoint, but we just want you to think from this standpoint. So if you're watching these series of interviews the next few months here on the Marcus Sims Media YouTube channel, we're going to see all type of different vibes, but we want you to think, to enrich you a little bit and bring a little bit of positivity in your area. I'm Marcus Sims, your host, and thank you for locking in and joining us on the Marcus Sims Media YouTube channel. If you'd like any sponsorship information, ideas for any guests that you'd like, you can feel free to email me at planet_sims, S-I-M-S, at yahoo.com. Now, my special guest that I have right now joining me is a guy that I don't think we've ever had a conversation that's lasted under like 10 minutes. I love picking his brain. I love to get his perspective on so many different things. I've known him for quite a while, but our theme for this particular show is going to be art, expressing yourself, creativity, and we're doing all this while getting a huge, big, heaping, warm, soothing cup of Afrofuturism. And we're going to talk about Afrofuturism. It's the chicken soup for the soul for 2024 and beyond. So I want to welcome creative innovator, thinker, artist, poet, writer, expressionist, just an all-around creative guy. If it can be created, he creates it. He can create stuff with cottage cheese. He's so creative, and it'll be so dope. I want to welcome my good friend, Alabama A&M's own, Huntsville's own, the Tennessee Valley's own, Jahni Moore. Jahni, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm good. Listen, man, that was a whole plate full. I need a knife, fork, spoon, and a shovel for that.
Look, I mean, your bio, look, I could go by your bio on your webpage, but literally Zoom won't give me that much time, and I'm going to have to charge up my battery. But if you are someone that likes the visual arts and you're anywhere within this country, trust me, I guarantee there's a state where John has a John Moore artwork, or just go online. You could always Google Jahni Moore for his artwork, Johnny the artist, and he's going to give you all the website information. But just incredible artwork, and I'm humbled to know you and to call you a good friend.
Oh wow, I'm humble as well. By that introduction.
Right, known Johnny for quite a while, and I think I don't think Johnny's ever put out a pitch where you say, that's not dope. So Johnny's always done a great job. So thank you, my brother, and thank you for joining us. Now, I gave everyone who's watching a really rough introduction of you, admittedly, but can you tell us a little bit about Johnny the artist's origin story? And we know you did not come from Krypton, and we know that your parents were not shot in a dark alley by anyone. So tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind. At least
Well,
I don't think you were from Krypton.
no. I'm from Sirius B. Just few planets over. Actually,
Okay.
I actually came to on this plane through Huntsville, Alabama area, born in this area. And I say born, B-O-R-N-E, born to this area. Grew up in a working class nature. That's where I felt most comfortable. And I think that's where I started to develop as the introvert, because nature is so very unforgiving. Doesn't matter who you are, how big you are, it's going to pretty much treat you the same. But the more you learn about her, the more you can integrate yourself into her cosmic rhythms, so to speak. So that's what I've strived to do my whole life. And I went to Rolling Hills Elementary School, Davis Hills, Johnson High School, Alabama A&M University, and then on to RISD, Savannah College of Art and Design for certifications, and finally the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for my MFA.
Wow. So Tennessee Valley's own, Huntsville's own. Johnny, who inspired you to become an artist when you sat there and said becoming an engineer, an architect, or a professional wrestler? You decided to go into the world of art. Who inspired you to do that?
Well, in the early days, I didn't know any artists. As a child growing up, I was inspired by George Washington Carver, and then on the flip side, people like Bruce Lee, Muhammad Ali. Those people were my heroes. And when I look at it, I don't know if you remember a character called Billy Jack.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, those were my inspirations, and watched a lot of shows like Little House on the Prairie, Good Times, all those different things. And finally, I realized that I love stories, and I
Hmm.
love telling stories. But early on, there were no visual artists that I knew. In fact, that didn't happen until one of my instructors. I graduated from high school. I was a student at A&M, and I went back to visit and show one of my high school teachers my first painting. And she compared the work to Diego Rivera. It wasn't a large painting, it was maybe 3 by 3. And she said, it looks like it should be large. It makes me think of Diego Rivera. Of course, at the time, I'd never heard of Diego Rivera. So she talked about, the muralists and everything like that. And I guess she was prophetic in saying that because murals is something I did end up doing. So that was probably the first artist that I looked into in terms of saying I want to be an artist. But sometimes we're labeled or we do things before the labels come. I
Mm.
always drew from comic books. So in saying that, I guess in truth, Stan Lee and his entourage would have been the first ones, because now that I think about it, I always drew from comic books. From a little boy, me and my friends, we get together and look at comic books and draw out of them and stuff like that. So I think I would have to go there.
Johnny, one of the things that I guess, and you don't think about the label of it as so much, but of course, growing up, for being someone who I've always loved sci-fi, I've always loved fantasy adventures, and we joke, but of course, those who watch Stranger Things, I really felt like Lucas was like 90% of my life. I'm gonna say probably 95% of my life, even when he got to playing basketball at some point. All that really related to me. But the theme that I think that's really become popular, I would say probably the past 4 or 5 years, has been this concept that's been around for a while, but now it's really seemed to be embraced: Afrofuturism. What is
Yes.
Afrofuturism for someone who we probably have more people who practice it, embody it, and do it, but they just don't know that they're doing it. But what is Afrofuturism?
It's basically a cultural aesthetic that combines science fiction, history, sometimes mysticism and religion with the African diasporic tradition, so to speak, or experience. So that's in essence, if you look at combining imagination, technology, and future and liberation, that's where we come up with Afrofuturism. Of course, it didn't get coined until I think 1994 when Mark Derry mentioned that in an article I think called "Black to the Future," and he
Hmm.
talked about Black people inserting themselves into that futuristic zone. We look back, there was the Jetsons that nothing was brown in there.
Right.
So, but we looked at that and we loved it. And we love watching, Buck Riders in the 25th century, Star Trek, which I think Star Trek, yeah, ironically, Star Trek came out in 1966 as well, which of course we'll tap into that a little bit later, tying in with Black Panther. But um, so that's what Afrofuturism is in terms of someone giving it a label. But as we said before, it was being practiced long before then, because we look at Sun Ra, who's called the father of Afrofuturism. So we're looking at, the 1930s with Sun Ra, and being a student right there on the campus of Alabama A&M University when he received his vision and charge to do what he went to do.
What's so interesting
So
is
wait, wait,
because
wait. So now think about it. Afrofuturism was born on the very ground where you sit right now, right there, right there. If he's the father of Afrofuturism and he received his vision right there on that space, in that space, that means Alabama A&M University is ground zero for Afrofuturism.
wow. Okay, okay. That's the difference. Wow. Okay, we're gonna have to look into that, and definitely, Johnny, some shirts. We have to get some shirts. AAMU, the home of Afrofuturism.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
That's it.
Okay. A great take on that. Now, of
Where's the
course,
monument?
right. Johnny, do you consider yourself an Afrofuturist? Now, after what you just said, are you an Afrofuturist artist, person, or philosopher in that area? Do you consider yourself that?
Yeah, I think it's a lifestyle. I don't think I guess when you look at it like the idea of religion, you have people who go out and tell everybody about their religion. Then you have those who exemplify and live it. Okay. Something my dad used to say to me when we were younger, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one any day. So to me,
Mm,
that's the most important thing is to embody it. So in that sense, I am an Afrofuturist. But I guess sometimes when you look at the isms, Afrofuturism, it seems to put it over in this little category where it sits. But this doesn't just sit, it leaks into every aspect of our society because when we talk about our past, we talk about it to show up our present, and we show up our present for our future. So, in essence, it's all Afrofuturism. We go to school, we eat so we can continue to live. We're always leaning toward that future, and we
true.
cannot avoid technology. So we actually live in that space of being Afrofuturist or Afrofuturism. But I must add here, there are other movements too that I've been trying to reconcile in my own psyche. There was the Afro-surrealistic movement.
Hmm.
That actually was coined even earlier than that. I'm thinking, once you start going down that rabbit hole, you find so many other things.
Right.
Amir Baraka wrote an article, I think 1974, dealing with Afro surrealism. And then, of course, I don't know, since Afro surrealism and Afro futurism, now there's another one called Afro pessimism.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not sure with that one. But, once again, I don't want to throw the whole barrel of hay out there, or the whole wagon of hay out there. We'll just stay in this arena of Afrofuturism.
Right, because and Johnny, what I think is so cool is when I look at Afrofuturism and just growing up in the era that I did, or involved in music, I look at artists like an Outkast who seem that they've embodied Afrofuturism. They don't call themselves that, but they pretty much embody that culture. You look at Janelle Monáe who did it. You look at how Earth, Wind, and Fire presented themselves. You look at how you mentioned Sun Ra, Funkadelic, how these artists they weren't wearing a I'm an Afrofuturistic gold chain or shirt or anything. They just did it, right?
They just did it, yeah. I mean, no bird I know has ever studied ornithology, but they can fly like heck, most of them. So it's one of those things where we are it. So to put a label on it, that's what other people do. That's what people have always done.
Mm-hmm.
Even in terms of art, people are creating things long before somebody decided to call, oh, that's art.
Mm-hmm.
Certain dances we did, somebody came and put a label on it in order to categorize it. Because once you categorize it, then you can transport that thing and do what you want to do with it. Even religion. That's why we have so many different names of religions. People have been practicing spirituality since the beginning of time, but we begin to name them and separate them in our various trinket boxes at churches. Oh, this is this. That's why you can have, 10 churches on one street, all Christian, but all with different names.
Mm. Now let me ask you this: in the artwork that you put out, you get so many beautiful, powerful pieces of art. Do you intentionally go the Afrofuture? How does that work out? Or is it just what comes to you? And this is natural. It's just natural because I look at it and now when I look at your work now, I'm like, yeah, Johnny's it's Afrofuturistic. It is. I mean, it is the type of vibe I would if I had to sit there and say I know no one wants to be labeled, but I can look at it within 20 seconds and see where he was going, or Johnny was trying to make a connection between local Africa and the galaxy. That's kind of like how I look at all three facets of what you do. But how do you approach your artwork that you put out?
Yeah. Well, it's like this. If I were to go to my mama's kitchen, okay, I'm gonna get certain types of food out of her kitchen. If I go to a friend of mine's kitchen who's Chinese, I'm gonna get certain types of food out of that kitchen. Okay. And then as I go to different people's kitchens, I'm gonna get different things because what's coming out of that kitchen, those recipes are a culmination of their lives and their experiences. Okay. So when I put my work out, I don't sit there and think, oh, what's Afrofuturistic? What can I put it? No,
Mm,
it just comes, an idea comes to me.
right.
I want to do this, and it comes out as a result of all those things that have come into me. Now they come out as this particular image or imagery. So no, I don't think about the idea. In fact, when I first heard about Afrofuturism, I looked at my work and realized that, it's almost like when Tupac said, in my heart, I couldn't find a place to rest until I got that thug life tatted on my chest.
Yeah,
In other
yeah.
words, there's a name for this. Someone just named me. And it wasn't until 2018, 2017 that I heard the word. And I'm thinking, wow, I found my tribe. I found the word that can list or that can
Mm.
sit on this thing that I do that can underscore it. So that's how it works
Let
for
me
me.
ask you, and this was, I guess, is a moment of transparency for me. I know growing up, of course, being a young black man, growing up in the Midwest and in the South and back and forth, uh, sometimes you weren't given the creative freedom to think out the box sometimes. Now, this is for me as you're growing up in certain situations. It's kind of hard being the only black person 10 miles by 10 miles that plays Dungeons and Dragons or follows
Mhm.
the Fantastic Four or the X-Men or, hey, I'm going to read a book about mythology or something like that. How did you handle that growing up? I guess the bigger question is, are black youth allowed to I know, yes, we're allowed to, but are we allowed to think out the box like that?
Well, I think it's more open now because those of us, like you and me, we've grown up and we've set out to create spaces where that's okay. Back in the day, we were othered. We were the ones that we were the weird one, the boy who could draw, or that dude over there. I got that. I got all of that. And in my family, I could easily be found curled up in a book. Now, when we watched Star Trek, all of us watched it, but
Hmm.
they watched it, but I didn't just watch it. I breathed it in because it felt like, I wanted to be in those spaces. But also watched Wild Kingdom, and I wanted to be in those spaces. And I
Hmm.
remember at one point my sister used to get upset when I would refer to them as humans. Man, humans get on my nerves because I saw myself as being other than. I thought about how animals work with nature and how strong they were and how they were able to exist in certain spaces where man would perish without all of the other stuff that he would bring with him. And I began to identify with that side of things. And the idea of flying, I've always loved it, of going into other spaces, not walking on 2 feet. All those things were very fascinating to me. So when I became an educator, I would tell my students, you have arrived in the classroom. You have arrived to where all of your quirks and things that are different from the mainstream society, let it be here. It's okay to be yourself in here, in this space. And I try to create that in my own home with my own children as well. Because my oldest son, I remember he had a Jeep, and he may come home listening to anything from the Beatles, hip hop to country music, in his Jeep, because I made his world safe for that. And he got married a few weeks ago, and his theme was Lord of the Rings and Star Wars.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome. Yeah,
Were you
that
were
was
you were you Gandalf or Bilbo Baggins?
well, I'd be Gandalf, yes.
Okay, okay, okay. Of course, yes, he'd be Gandalf.
Yeah. In fact, I took one of those little tests, and it listed me as Gandalf. But yeah, to see that, and of course the wedding venue had sort of it looked like it was something straight off the Lord of the Rings.
Wow.
So that right there, seeing him in that space and being safe in that space and having gathered around him a consortium of friends who respect and also like that space. That's how it becomes safe. That's how we make a more equitable world. Um, and it's not just black and white. It's so many more colors in that crayon box.
Johnny, you mentioned a little earlier at the top of the show, but talk to us about once a little, if you can go a little more in depth about Afrofuturism and the importance of this man.
Oh, Sun Ra. Okay. So Sun Ra was a student. Sun Ra was a student at Alabama. Well, it wasn't A&M University at the time. I think it was A&M College, something of that nature. And he was a music major, education. And after about a year, he was trying to decide what he wanted to do, and he had wandered out to what he said he was a cornfield. And at the edge of that cornfield, um, some type of mothership came and took him up into this vessel and took him to the planet Jupiter and told him that he was not to complete his education as a music teacher, that he was to create a band and he would use music. He was to go and use music to liberate his people. So with that, he left A&M, went back down to the Bessemer, Birmingham area, and created his band, which he in turn called the Orchestra, and it all started from there. The research he did, the Egyptian mythology, space, and he saw himself as that. So his music was very cosmic and derivative of these types of sounds, and he talked about at one point he began to talk about being from Saturn and from another place. And by situating yourself in another space, you're able to pull from a different sensibility, which that's where that imagination kicks in. And imagination is pretty much at the root of everything.
Wow.
You know, look at it as being this esoteric spirit floating kind of scenario. But no, imagination is at the base of all life.
True, true. And an incredible thing, we definitely want to encourage everyone. You can stream it now. Check out the great music, and there are actually documentaries about Sun Ra as well. And Jahni here within our area has been a true proponent of pushing the legacy, the music, the message of the great Sun Ra. Alabama A&M's, the Tennessee Valley Zone, Alabama's own Sun Ra. So definitely, if you're someone who's into futurism, whether you know it or not, and chances are you probably are, you just, hey, I didn't know that. But definitely check out the music of Sun Ra. One Sun Ra song should be on your playlist. I say this, you tell me about your music, by what you're listening to. You should have one Miles Davis, you should have one Bob Marley, you should have one Beatles song or something like that. So you add a Sun Ra to your collection of songs. This is Marcus Sims Media. I'm speaking with the one and only, the only one, Jahni Moore, artist extraordinaire, guy who wears a lot of hats. We're just gonna Jahni the artist basically says it the best, because I think Jahni the artist expounds on everything, because he's an artist visually, mentally, spiritually, you name it. Jahni does a great thing. I'm always happy to have a conversation with Jahni. Don't forget to check out the Marcus Sims Media YouTube channel. Subscribe, like, give us a like, the whole nine. Jahni, a lot of times if I have to describe Afrofuturism, I'll say this. You've seen Black Panther. Okay, there you
Yes.
go. Okay, there you go. That's Afrofuturism. Bye. Have a good day. Expound on what I just told someone.
Okay. So when we look at a film like Black Panther, um, you have this mythical society that's situated in Africa that's light years beyond the rest of the world in technology. So you have the imagination at work, you have the technology at work, okay? And then you have an operating society. But because Wakanda is in Africa and has to interact with the rest of the world, it brings in some of the other issues and world problems and
Mm-hmm.
addresses those problems through the lens of T'Challa, Black Panther.
Mm-hmm.
So it gives us a way of imagining ourselves. What would things have been like had colonialization not taken place? Where would we have gone as a people if it had not happened in that regard? And when we look at things like there is the vibranium, and then
Mm-hmm.
we look at metals like coltan, that's being mined now out the continent. That most of the things we utilize, cell phones and computers and spaceships, would not work without these minerals that come from the continent. So I think the whole idea of vibranium is a derivative of those metals that
Mm-hmm.
have come from that continent that the rest of the world needs to live in this technological hyperspace. So that's why Black Panther is so important. And plus the fact that I think it was the 12th or 13th highest grossing film of all time, putting a Black hero up front. And then we look at how he was created and when he was created. 1966, you're talking about the whole Black Power movement, the hotbed of it all, and Stan Lee deciding to come out with this character called the Black Panther, and then also the Black Panthers movement out there in California, with uh Huey Newton and them. And once again, going back, it comes back to Alabama again, because Cleaver and Newton actually went down to Lowndes County, Alabama, to meet with Stokely Carmichael to look at what they were doing down there with SNCC and the voter and the whole the Voter Rights Act and movement down there, getting the people to vote. And the Black people had formed their own party, and their symbol was this stealthy, crouching Black Panther. They weren't actually, they were called the Lowndes County something party. It was the white people who began to refer to them based on the animal they chose as the Black Panther Party. When they saw this, they asked if they could use it. They took it back and gave it to Emory Douglas, the artist for the Black Panther. He slimmed it down, and that became the symbol for the Black Panther Party. 1966, once again, at that seminal year. And that year also was when Star Trek came out on TV.
Wow, wow. And if you're just joining this, as I said before, this is Jahni the artist. Our theme is Afrofuturism. It's the summer, the power of positivity, 256. And you can't get, in my opinion, more positive than when you start embrace or look at Afrofuturism. I kind of like with Jahni, it's not something that I wear. I don't have an Afrofuturism tattoo, hat, shirt, or anything. It's just something that if I like it, I do it. And that's pretty much it. But of course, as Jahni said, you have labels, and I'm okay with it. That does not offend me if someone were to say that. I would, if you put that on my bio and included that on there, that would not offend me whatsoever. I own it because literally I've been doing it, I would say, 90% of my life, so that would not blow my mind whatsoever. Jahni, you mentioned Stan Lee a few moments ago. So I have to ask you this, and as we're starting to wrap things up, I want to thank you for your time. You mentioned Stan Lee. Let's look at it. I'm sure you've heard this comparison when you look at the X-Men. You look at the X-Men and how they say the X-Men are a reflection of what's going on in society, because the X-Men represent an oppressed people, a people that's discriminated against, misunderstood, and all that. And of course, they say, some people have said, well, Professor X is like a version of Martin Luther King, and Magneto is a version of Magneto. I can see the comparisons. I don't know if that's either been confirmed or denied by Stan Lee. I've read varying reports. But what's your take on the X-Men? Of course, they had a huge series, X-Men 97, that came out. But talk a little bit about X-Men, and is there a connection between X-Men and us?
I think there is. Stan Lee, I think the nature of an artist is to be rebellious, is to go against and challenge the status quo. And when we look at what Jack Kirby and Stan Lee did back then, they did just that. They were a subgenre, a subculture beneath the regular culture. So comic books, at one point, parents steered their children away from comic books. Something children had to almost sneak and read because they were seen as being something frivolous and a waste of time and energy and everything. But there are those of us who were drawn to these characters. And I say we're drawn to the characters not just because we live in a fantasy world, but we're drawn to things on a psychological level that we can relate to. So if we're drawn to this character, there's something inside of us that possesses what that character possesses. And I think all the superheroes, all those people, they're innately flawed, but sometimes their very flaw becomes a source of their power. Their pain becomes their power. I'm gonna give you an example, and I'm gonna go back to Stan Lee. Let's look at I'm gonna use John Walsh, for example, America's Most Wanted. His son Adam was killed. Because of that, John Walsh, a fire was lit within him, and he became probably the most visible advocate for tracking down criminals on these types of crimes. So he took his pain and turned it into a source of power, which not only helped himself, but helped others as well. Okay. And if you look at most of the comic book characters, most of the heroes in general, that's something they have in common. So when we go back to Stan Lee and we look at X-Men, you look at the word X. X is a symbol of resurrection, okay? And it's sometimes seen as the missing component. And when we look at Black people, what Invisible Man, Ralph Ellison. The missing component was seen but not seen. And then so you have these two opposing characters, it seems, Professor X and Magneto. And if we look at, but they're both for the same thing, for the liberation, the freedom, the well-being of the mutants. Okay. And what are mutants? They're othered. Okay. And if we look at, as people of color in this country, we were othered. The parallels are too close to be coincidence. Okay. So when we think about the Malcolm X being more militant, saying, let's rise up if we have to. And then you have Dr. King, who at a point was more of a person trying to find ways in which we could integrate into the society seamlessly. But it was a society that fought back more so than our people not wanting to be there. So when you look at the X-Men, it's the same way. And there's a statement that Magneto makes. He says they talk about we need to be cured, of this malady of being a mutant. And he returns and says, we are the cure. And you think about when Dr. King talks about Black people being the conscience of America. And we know that no matter how healthy the body is, if the mind is ill, so the body goes. So these artists were dealing with the real world metaphorically through their work, which is what artists have done since the beginning of when art became art. We can go to Charles Schultz, who did Peanuts, and he put Franklin in the classroom before integration was even a thing. And because of that, he got death threats. So again, that's what artists have done. And that's what artists do, is they present these ideas to get the conversation started, to challenge challenge the status quo, to make it simple.
And I'm thinking, especially with what you're talking, because I saw it was a image, a meme online a while ago where they were saying one of the guys who was against the mutant resistance against the mutants, didn't like the mutants, didn't like what they stood for, whatever, and he's yelling, "Oh, you dirty mutants!" And up under it said, "We know what he means by saying you dirty mutants." And I was like, you know what? And of course, we've always known what, but it's like, okay, you know what? That does hit harder because he did put such an emphasis on you dirty mutants, where it just sounded so. As people of color, as people who have been misunderstood, the whole nine, it hits a little different. That's why that storyline, I think, has really worked with so many people of color, people who feel oppressed or don't have a voice in society. I think that's what was such visionary of honorary soul brother number 2, Stan Lee. So, yeah, I've always felt that way. But Jahni, as we're wrapping everything up, I have to ask: one, you gotta get rid of one. One of them you gotta get rid of. Black Panther, Luke Cage.
Oh my goodness!
You gotta get you gotta put one of their comics in the dumpster, Jahni. Which one? Black Panther or Luke Cage?
Ooh, I don't know if you remember the original Roots.
Okay.
But I think it was the last time, not the last time, but one of the times when Kunta Kinte ran away. And then the enslaver came to him and he had an axe or a saw, and he held it up to his midsection, and then he held it down to his foot, and all Kunta Kinte did was hold his head up and scream, "I gotta lose one of those."
Right.
So wow. I guess I would have to say, if I had to toss one, it would have to be Luke Cage. Okay. But realize what we're tossing. We're tossing someone who walks and talks and lives among us.
Right.
I mean, in our society, what would serve us better as Black men than to be bulletproof? I mean,
big facts on that one. Big facts.
Yes, that in and of itself is a commentary on where we stand as Black men, as Black people in this country. To
Wow,
be
that's a
bulletproof
big facts
has
on
to
that.
be a superpower. Okay. But I'll say keep Black Panther in Wakanda, because that situates us not in the situation, but equal to and even beyond the situation, which once again is what Malcolm X and what Magneto was talking about. Let's establish our own. Okay. It's almost like when we were children and we would go to somebody's house and they would have an attitude and whatever. My mom always told me, you come to your own backyard and you have so much fun over there, eventually they'll come to your yard. And that was always true. We would come in our backyard, we start playing, next thing you know, somebody else come over, and then we basically brought the party to our house. Wakanda
Right.
had the ability to bring the party to their house. And I think that as people of color, we have real estate that we're not thinking about. We think about the actual physical land, which I'm not saying that's not important, but we have to look at our intellectual property as real estate and begin to build that. And once we begin to build our Wakanda, our Zion from the inside out, and then we will command that respect that we say we've wanted all the time. But we can never follow the status quo and think we're going to create something totally new and different. It has to come from, we talk about outer space, it has to come from the inner space.
Wow. Jahni, I want to thank you for your time. As I said at the very top of this interview, I could ask. I had questions, but I know when me and you talk, it's one of these conversations we could go on for a while. So I have a feeling that we're going to have to revisit this a little later on. There's going to have to be a part 2, part 3, as we mentioned earlier. You can't do Afrofuturism any justice, and what we gave you was half a drop. Man, literally, we gave you half a drop of just how complex and how beautiful and how thoughtful and how delightful and entertaining the concept of Afrofuturism is. It's something that I would encourage everyone. If, as I said, if you have never picked up a comic book dealing with Black Panther, dealing with Luke Cage, dealing with the X-Men, dealing with the Storm series, you can go over look at Cyborg on DC. DC does a great job of it as well. And then there's just some great classic books that we're touching on as well. Of course, listen to the futuristic sounds of everything from Sun Ra to Funkadelic to Janelle Monáe to the artists that you have now, Jadena, Outkast, and Kendrick Lamar. Kendrick Lamar, definitely a fusion of Afrofuturism and what you're getting from K-Dot as well. Jahni, what's a website for someone who wants more information, wants to connect with you the whole night? How can someone reach out to you?
Well, my website is in the process of being revamped right now. So it's JahniTheArtist.com. That's Jahni, Jahni, the artist, TheArtist.com. And you can also check out my blog. It's actually ongoing. It'll be linked with the website when it's done. But it's called Afroblastic. That's AFROBLASTIK. Afroblastic.com. And on there you'll find Notes of a Native Son. I drop something about once a week. Every Wednesday you'll find a new story. They're basically stories of the mystical but the real situations that have unfolded that show how we ourselves can manifest on this plane.
Awesome. So definitely check out Jahni on those websites. Also, Jahni, you're also available on IG as well, Instagram, right? They can kind of follow you a little bit. Am I correct? Can they follow
Yeah,
you? Reach out to you?
yeah, that's Jahni the Artist. Once
Yeah,
again,
we'll reach out to Jahni as Jahni the Artist as well. This will be a part 2. I'm already claiming it, part 2, because I got to only about 30% of the questions that I had, so that's on me. But we're going to definitely do a part 2. And Jahni, thank you for everything that you do artistically for those of us in this, not only in this area, but on statewide, nationwide, global-wide side. We definitely appreciate you. Thank you so much. And Jahni, thank you for joining Marcus Sims Media for a few moments. And as we put our pinky into the genre of Afrofuturism.
That's it. And I'm glad to be here, honored to be here. And in the words of the great Andre 3000, the South got something to say.
Right, the South got something to say. Yes, sir. Be sure to check us out on Marcus Sims Media YouTube channel. Also, any questions, concerns, sponsorship ideas, planet_Sims at yahoo.com. Until next time, this is the summer of positivity, 256, the power of positivity. Have a great one.